All right, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening for Berkshire Green Drinks. This event is sponsored and organized by Berkshire Environmental Action Team, also known as BEAT. If you don't already know about us, we have our end of year newsletter right over there. And you can also visit our website, thebeatnews.org. We also have a sign-in sheet floating around if you haven't signed in. And next month's Green Drinks is taking place on Wednesday, December 12th? The 13th. It's the second Wednesday. And like previous years, it will just be BEAT staff. It's only going to be online, and we're just going to talk about our accomplishments from this past year and what's to come next year. You can find out more about that on our website, thebeatnews.org. We also have our 20th anniversary celebration on Saturday, December 2nd at our office in Pittsfield. We just recently finished our first phase of renovations. So we're really excited to share that with everyone. And that's from 1 to 3 p.m. Folks on Zoom, if you could please stay muted throughout Tom's presentation. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and we'll make sure to relay those to Tom during the Q&A session. I think that's all I have. Brittany, am I forgetting anything?
Make sure to donate to BEAT at the end of the year.
Brittany said, make sure to donate to BEAT at the end of the year. All right, so I'm gonna pass it off to Tom Ryan, our speaker this evening, and let him introduce himself a little more.
Can everybody hear me on Zoom? Excellent. So thank you all for having me here to listen to this talk. Thank you to Chelsea and BEAT. And also Christine and Bill of Big Elm Brewery. My name is Tom Ryan, and I'm a forester for the Department of Conservation and Recreation. A little fun fact, anybody know what the state tree of Massachusetts is? The big elm. The American elm. So I think it's very fitting that we're having this talk here in this venue. So I've been working for the state for much longer than I ever imagined, frankly. I was a service forester for 19 years, and as part of my talk for forest conservation, that was really a core element of my role as a service forester. And so I predominantly worked with private lands. But in reality, I worked with all land ownerships, particularly if anybody was doing any forest management or timber harvesting. I was the entity in this southwestern district, so pretty much west of Westfield, south of Pittsfield. I was the go-to for forestry, and I was involved in lots of projects all the time, a little bit. Just recently, I made a shift to management forestry, mainly because I wanted a change of pace and really to have projects that I could take on and less of them and be more intensely involved with. But from a forest conservation standpoint, I really found service forestry rewarding. I got to, probably my best part of my job was to meet with somebody that ask for my assistance, come out to their property, walk through their land and explore it with them and get to talk about all the great things that I was seeing out there. And actually, frankly, that's where I feel most comfortable is in the forest. So right now, in front of an audience, I'm not super comfortable, but Bill said, just imagine that everybody's trees, and so that does set me at ease. Yeah. So with the service forestry program, we had a lot of offerings for folks to bring them knowledge and information about their properties. The forest stewardship program is really amazing, where you can tap into some state resources to hire a consulting forester and do an actual more intensive inventory of your property and develop a forest management plan that's catered to your goals. You can also have a plan that's really catered towards birds and their habitat needs. And so if you have specific birds that you're trying to attract to your property, you can have a property plan that gives you an idea of what birds will occupy that space now and what actions you could take to enhance the habitat for birds on the property. And then you can also now with our realities of today, you can actually have a plan that is specifically towards climate resiliency. And so all of that is voluntary. It's just really educationally oriented. The idea is that the more knowledge and information that you can give to an owner about their property, the better actions and decisions that they will make to meet their needs and choices that they'll make with their land. If you want, you can also use that management plan to enroll in the Chapter 61 program, which gives owners the ability to have a lower tax rate in exchange for saying that they're not going to develop their property. And if you really want to take the next step, you can actually start looking into conservation restrictions, which protect land in perpetuity beyond your lifetime. And so that's really like a way to make a lasting impact and have a permanent effect on your property into the future. The other thing I wanted to highlight in the state is the Community Preservation Act. And it's been around for quite some time. All of the properties that you see here in green are towns that have adopted it. All the properties you see in yellow are cities that have adopted it. All the white areas are towns that have not adopted it. The Community Preservation Act is designed as a tool. It's a taxing tool. That's kind of the wah-wah part of it, where a lot of towns and folks don't really want additional tax. But this revenue stream has to be dedicated explicitly for land conservation, affordable housing, or historic preservation. And so in light of the realities that I've experienced out in the Berkshires in the recent past, affordable housing is a huge issue out here. And so if we want to have folks that are actually working our lands and working jobs that we all rely on every day, having young families here, affordable housing is an absolute necessity. And so if the town adopts the Community Preservation Act, a portion of their taxes, which can be set by the town, it can also be above a certain threshold. There's a lot of variables at play that can really make it work specifically for that community, so they can provide for those needs into the future. In light of that, in spite of low adoption out in our region, this is a snapshot of southwest corner of Massachusetts. We've actually been quite successful with land conservation efforts. And so all of these colors you see here are different entities that have protected land within this corner of the state. And it's quite a mix. So it includes DCR, Department of Fish and Wildlife, land trusts, other not-for-profits, and actually down here we even have other states that own land in Massachusetts. This yellow down here is owned by a Connecticut MDC that manages their land for their water supply. So with all of that, as a forester, I'd like to kind of get you all to think about what our forests look like today and where they came from and where they're likely to go into the future. And realize that our forests are dynamic, and by dynamic is they're constantly changing. Some of the changes happen slower than we necessarily perceive. Other things are much more drastic. about 100 years ago, most of our land was growing back from agricultural abandonment, which happened between 1880, 1920. So a lot of our forests, or a lot of our land was not quite what people would consider forest yet. It was seedling, sapling stage of growth. At that point in time, every acre had thousands of seedlings and saplings on it, as that agricultural abandonment was happening, to the tune of like 10,000 seedlings and saplings per acre. Fast forward to where we are now in time. This is actually given to me by Bill Van Doren, who runs our data and CFI program for DCR management, or actually DCR lands, specifically management forestry. So most of our forest today is mature, and so we've evolved to this point in time in our current forest condition. And all of this was a direct result of our land use history. It was literally a result of the human hand on the landscape. The other factors that have come into play to this area, charcoal was a big industry, and so a lot of our land was harvested intensively to provide charcoal. And then also, since then, there's been periodic timber harvesting. So with that, we now have a forest that's more or less in this mature state. As you can see, most of this pie is in what's called saw timber size class, and then this is pole timber, seedling saplings, and other areas that are non-stocked. And that's also reflective. Bill relayed to me that that's quite reflective of what is across our state. So with that, we have a lot of things to think about. I threw this up here, as that was a frequent question that I got when I met with folks. What do I need to do? Like, I want to maintain my forest. I want to be a good steward. What do I have to do? The reality is, you don't have to do anything. And a lot of people kind of, even foresters, when I say that, they kind of scoff and say like, oh my God, how could you say that? But the reality is a forest will maintain itself. It may not take care of you and your needs. So you really need to think about what your expectations are within your forest and frame those objectives and goals and have that be what guides your decision-making process. And so within our forest, when I first started work for the state, everything was, mind-blowing. Let's think about it on the watershed scale. There was the watershed initiative happening. Everything that we're going to make for decisions are based on that, watershed. Let's, forget political boundaries. We're going to look at the Housatonic watershed. At the time, I was working for Tom O'Brien, who was a watershed team leader. I was his assistant, and it was all focused on Housatonic and Hudson watersheds. Fast forward a little bit more in time, a lot of people were like, well, we've really got to think about our forests and our landscape from a habitat perspective. We really need to start managing our forests with that goal and biodiversity, invasive plants, thinking about forest products and income, aesthetics and recreation, carbon sequestration versus storage. I mean, you start thinking about all these different things that you can be doing with your forest, and it can get people to the point where they don't know where to go. They don't know really how to frame the way they're thinking, like with that idea of like, I don't want to make the wrong decision. The reality is, in my opinion, you're not going to make the wrong decision. You just have to be comfortable with the choices that you make. I kind of think of things in kind of the yin and yang concept. So for every action you make, there may be a little bit of bad that happens from that, or every positive thing or a negative thing will have a little bit of good. It's sort of every action will have an equal and opposite reaction, if you will. So there's really no perfect answer other than gotta make a decision, even if it's deliberately to do nothing, make that with your eyes wide open and be comfortable with those choices. From a climate perspective, I would say that there's three main things to think about. You can take the approach of resistance, which is really trying to not do much and just hope for the best. You can take the approach of resilience, which is doing deliberate actions in your forest based on where you think the forest is going to go with the resources that you have on hand. Or you can think of transition, where it's a little bit more radical, but it's like, I recognize that the forest I have here today is in jeopardy, and that it's likely to be more suited to an area that is maybe a little bit farther from here. So the idea of transition is actually bringing species along and recruiting species that are slightly out of their range in transitional planting. So with all of these ideas and concepts of how we can manage our forest, particularly from a state's perspective, it's not just a family where you have a few people making the decisions, which is difficult in and of itself. Anybody, I think a lot of people can relate to that. When you get to the state level, you have that many more cooks in the kitchen, and you really got to kind of think about building partnerships, getting a lot of feedback from people. And so when I first started in September, a lot of the projects that I stepped into were with a focus of landscape scale restoration, specifically with a habitat focus. And so I was involved with, and still am, with this mass dynamic forest restoration initiative, and we're working with partners. It's starting to grow out here into the Berkshires, and so I'm hoping to be adding to this group. And through these partnerships, we're really hoping to coordinate our efforts so that we're not all in each other's little silos, but actually talking with each other and working on habitat at a landscape scale across boundaries, and particularly taking on projects that are not likely suitable for most private landowners. And so with that, this is my new region. It's the same as my other region. As a service forester, I'm still working in the southwest corner, but instead of working on all of the properties, these are the lands that are specific to DCR that I am now helping manage. And within that, within this range and in my district, we have 3 landscape designations: parklands, reserves, and woodlands. Most of my work is going to be focused on these brown areas, which are the woodlands. And I guess I'd say right now we're officially in a pause, and we're evaluating our goals and objectives. And I believe, I'm told that early December, we will have clear guidelines of how we're going to move forward with our management activities. But what I wanted to do was to actually kind of walk you through some of the process and my thinking for specific areas that we target for our efforts. And so in last September, we were working on a project in Mount Washington, this region right here, this corner of the state. And the specific project is 362 acres in size, a total area. The actual area that I'll be working in is less than that. This is a unique project for many reasons. This area is designated as an area of critical environmental concern. It's also priority habitat for endangered species, and it is a source drinking water supply. So I've got a lot of things at play and a lot of people's objectives that I need to manage. And so I had gone through the motions of the initial proposal, developing the prescription, marking the sale, having everything ready to go, having a public process for a tour so people could ask me questions. I reached out to just about everybody I can think of and had this packaged up and ready to go. And it's paused, which is okay, because I was able to take this period to take that project and put it through a specific process of reevaluating this process, this project from a climate perspective. And so I took training with the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Sciences that went from February to May, and it was really an awakening perspective of how to frame my work specifically for a climate focus. And I ended up falling into, when we talked about the resistance, resilience, transition, for me, the project, when I framed it in the way I was thinking, it really felt like it was more of a resistance, or resilience. Sorry, it was a resilience approach. And so this project area, if anybody's familiar with Mount Washington, you drive up into Mount Washington, you look out over the cattle shed field, you can see the cattle shed in the corner down there. I hung that nice informative sign about the project that I was going to be doing. And this area right down here is if you were standing on the edge of that field looking in, and this is a wall of invasive plants. It's about that high. It's all barberry, multiflora rose, and quite not a fun place to work in at all. And so these were the goals were to, the biggest factor is that most of the stand is heavily stocked with ash. And so that effectively has an expiration date. I even went back there this summer, and most of the ash, not most of the ash, but I evaluated the stand condition, and we've already lost a significant amount of that ash that was still healthy last year. So part of that idea was to do a sanitation, or now it's looking more like a salvage of the ash. Continue to monitor other invasives, that insects that we're concerned about, that being adelgid, scale, and spongy moth, formerly known as gypsy moth. And also, recapture some of that, particularly that ash that we're going to be losing, and try to make that into a durable wood product. So produce wood products from that. And so this is down by the stream. It's quite picturesque, and you really need to think about, how am I going to do this project? I've got a timing restriction because of endangered species concerns. I've got equipment concerns. When you get heavy equipment on the site, with the realities of what we're dealing with irregular extremes in temperature and precipitation patterns, there's a lot to think about in terms of challenges. One of the opportunities for the site is that it's actually got quite a wealth of existing tree species that are present. So there's white oak out there, there's hickory, there's a lot of birch, red maple, oak, red oak and white oak. And so those are the opportunities that I feel like I have to work with. And so from a resilience standpoint, those are the species that I want to favor. Those are already actually more like if you were to look at this area, it's a transitional forest in between northern hardwoods, which is beech birch maple, and central hardwood, which is more oak hickory. And so the idea is to favor more of the oak hickory element with the likely future that we're going to be dealing with. And so I'm trying to also think outside of the box with what kind of things I can do out there. I have the picture of the sheep in there because of the invasive plants that are present out there, with the reality that this is also a drinking water supply. I wanted to think of alternative ways of getting a handle on some of the invasives. And so I'm going to trial working with some local farmers to at least do some management intensive grazing, hopefully within near the cattle shed field. And hopefully that'll be a means to kind of knock it back. And also volunteer recruitment. There's an initiative happening in Mount Washington right now, which has been going on for quite some time, led by the Conservation Commission. The Mount Washington Invasive Plant Management Partnership has really brought in a lot of parties, DCR, Nature Conservancy in particular, and we're trying to work together to think about how can we manage invasives in Mount Washington. And then the realities of invasive plant control within DCR right now, particularly from a forestry standpoint, is we have to treat that as an in-kind service. And so I really can't do any invasive plant control until I sell the timber. I mean, there's other avenues that I can work with, but it's a little bit more cumbersome. And so we're trying to think of different ways of thinking outside of that box so that we can actually get out there, do invasive plant control before we get any forestry operations happening. And then there's also an extensive, not extensive, but there's a road network in there that has failed culverts, erosion issues, and these are all things that I want to take care of with this project. And I threw this picture in as an example of some of the public outreach that needs to happen. Most people are not necessarily going to pay attention to those announcements of like, hey, I'm going to do a project. You know, I want everybody to listen, and you're trying to think about all the different ways you can engage people and get them to come and listen and hear what you have to say, and you know, have an idea of what's going to happen. But people don't really pay attention until they see a dramatic change. And so for them, like there's a visceral reaction to seeing that kind of change. We generally, as people, don't like to see change. And so I've had a number of times as a service forester, I took folks out to a harvest area, explained to them what happened, and then you go back and revisit it. This location was actually formerly owned by the Beckett Land Trust. It's now a trustee's property, the quarry. And so that was right fresh after it happened, and it was a local group of families and their kids to come out and see what we were doing. So these are some of the things I'm hoping for. If I could have a dream, I'd say I'd get more public support for the work that I'm trying to do, and just an awareness of proactive management. I'm hoping that the site will respond well to a treatment, and then I can get more recruitment of white oak and hickory and other species that are going to be really well suited to the site. Really hoping I get a lot of the invasives controlled, and then follow up with monitoring the project area, and then have this harvest support a rural economy, that's really hard to say, rural economy, and sequester a lot of these into durable wood products. And so this is an actual map of that same treatment area. Here's the road coming in with some of the culverts that have failed. The actual treatment areas are here. All of these other areas that are shaded are not going to be entered because they are sensitive for water quality purposes. A lot of them are buffers or filter strips along the streams and wetlands. And then some of these areas were just frankly really steep. So we don't want to be in there. So supporting the rural economy and producing durable wood products. Why support local wood products? I think it's a good idea. I mean, we all use wood products every day. I got some of this information from the Massachusetts Woodlands Institute. Each Massachusetts resident uses the equivalent in wood products of an 18-inch tree. It's 100 feet tall every year. That's a lot of wood. And we literally live in a forest. Massachusetts statewide is about 60% forested. Out here in Western Mass, we're closer to 85% forested. So we live in a forest, yet we import 98% of the wood products that we use. So that seems like something out of balance there. And so I'm doing my best efforts to try and get people to be aware of the ability to buy and support local wood producers. This was a timber framing demonstration held up at Hancock Shaker Village with Jack Sobin. That was probably one of the best weeks of my life. I got up like every morning, jumped out of bed to go and help put together this frame. That was a truly rewarding experience. So it was a green timber frame build. If you can ever get the chance to hold a really sharp tool and use it on some green pine, you will feel like the strongest person in the world, because it will just literally cut like butter, and it's amazing. And so like there is a growing reality that, you know, supporting local wood is a climate solution. Part of our Forest as Climate Solutions initiative, right out of the initiative, says that we will include efforts to promote and incentivize the use of wood harvested from Massachusetts forest that will sequester carbon and durable wood products that meet local needs. I think that's pretty cool. That's what I really gravitated towards. And so some of the things that I'd like to draw on from my past experiences. 2017, I did a Sheffield Town Forest event here. That was a lot of planning, a lot of work. I was really stressed out by it, but really it ended up being, I think, a good day where people got to see a lot that was happening in this community. And I had demonstrations for log scaling, portable milling. I brought in the Woodworkers Guild to show off their techniques. And then in 2019, I helped with a Bach project from Yo-Yo Ma, and he was working with a naked table project, and the fella contacted me, and I helped connect him with the Woodworkers Guild, and so we ended up assembling and constructing 36 tables made out of ash for community building, and that was a really amazing day, and you know I'm so proud of being able to contribute to that. And then I did every year I go and teach at a conservation camp for it's Massachusetts Junior Conservation Camp, where kids can come and basically have an intensive 2-week summer camp where they, when they graduate from the camp, they'll actually have their hunter safety certification. I forget what there's a couple other certifications they can get in that process, but I come in to teach people how to get lost, or no, just kidding, orienteering, you know, how not to get lost. But then, you know, one of their main events canceled last minute, and so I was able to work with the instructor to do a bluebird box construction with all the kids at the camp, and that was really cool. So I basically made a whole bunch of kits, and we assembled bluebird boxes. I forgot earplugs. So if you ever do something like that, I highly recommend earplugs. But that was really cool too. And then most recently in 2023, Beartown was completing a project, hazard tree removal along Blue Hill and Brett Road. And so that was a drastic change. And that was where I was still functioning as a service forester, and I got a lot of questions about it. And generally, the response I got was, you know, they were grateful for the information. And then I was surprised at how many people said, well, why aren't you doing more? And I kind of just said, well, I'd like to do more, but that's not what we're allowed to do right now. And so the collaboration that I had with Greenagers was some of this harvest involved European larch. Not a lot, but just enough. And if anybody's had the pleasure of working with European larch, it's actually quite rot resistant. And so we were going to keep that in-house and use it for DCR's purposes, mill it on our own. We weren't getting it done. And so I reached out to Greenagers and said, hey, you know, would you have any need for this wood, and maybe we can work something out. And Greenagers was excellent, and so they milled the wood, and they took half of the wood for their front lawn food program, and then they also used their wood for the trail efforts they do for bog bridging. And then I also went out and helped them for a couple days with the milling on their site. They were trialing their farm mill. And we also use those materials on DCR lands for bog bridging and some of the structures at Beartown. So my next sort of thoughts are hoping to make some of these come a reality. Innovative technologies. You know, there's a lot of talk out there right now about biochar. I think if we can think about that in terms of a climate solution, it'll be a good relationship with agriculture. You know, there's been a lot of success with people supporting agriculture, and that's a possibility for us in the future. Biochar is effectively taking things that are normally waste to us, but converting it into biochar, which is really a fancy word for charcoal. You can use that as a supplement to enhance agricultural soils, and that increases the ability of that ag site to retain moisture and have nutrients available for their crops. And so it really enhances crops, and you're actually taking carbon out of that cycle and locking it up in the ground for thousands of years. Pretty cool. And my next sort of idea is plantations for affordable housing. If I can make this dream come true, I will be a very happy man, and I'll just retire at that point. My idea is to honor the legacy of the CCC to help build affordable homes today. So this picture up here is actually some of our efforts from the CCC era, 1930s. These fellows are actually out planting trees. This is what some of our plantations look like now. And if we don't manage them, they are going to take care of themselves, and that will probably end up looking a lot like a giant game of pickup sticks. I don't want to see that. I'm hoping that we can use this resource today for some of our affordable housing efforts. And I also just wanted to point you to some educational resources that I think are particularly relevant today for climate forestry. Yale has got this speaker series which is going on, which the last one I found particularly enlightening and inspiring. Professor Mike Dockery out of the University of Minnesota described his research into indigenous land use history. And so he particularly highlighted the Menominee tribe in Michigan and how they have been effectively managing their reservation since the 1850s on a sustained yield basis. And it was some of the most inspirational concepts that I've heard in a long time. And so I think that's very translatable to us here. And some of the other things I'll just point you to, the NIAX training that I went through, that was pretty amazing. Northern Woodlands is one of my favorite publications. They cover everything related to the North Woods. It's in a seasonal quarterly magazine. Whenever that comes in the mail, I'm reading it from cover to cover just because it's all about forests, and so I geek out on that. And then I had to throw that in. It's not the particularly best website, but we're going to try to improve that. That's our main clearinghouse for Bureau of Forest Fire Control and Forestry. I think I'm closing in on when I should be ending. Am I right? Okay, well, good. That was the next slide. Thank y'all for listening to me. This frame I do have a lot of fun with. We purchased that from the former Hartwood School, and it's a cruck frame that kind of that Service Forestry puts together at shows to highlight the beauty of our local woods and some general timber framing concepts. This is at Town Forest event. I don't remember the exact location, but this was somewhere out east. There's my buddy who runs a stewardship program and is a service forester out east, Mike Downey. Here's our portable sawmill in action at the Town Forest event. One of the things that I keep telling people they've made the connection with agriculture. They've been exceptionally successful with supporting local agriculture. And what I implore people is to not forget about the table in the farm to table movement. So, the origins of said table. So, thank you. I'll speed that up. Any questions?
Yeah, what was ahead? It sounds like maybe the Western office is taking more control over the ACDC. The Berkshire area, that I can go all the way to Boston.
So have the Western offices have more control over the ACEC management? Okay. And
I know that was a request that personally I made a while ago.
okay. And you're on the
Conservation.
got you. Okay. It's nice to see you in person. I think I've only talked with you on the phone.
Right.
Yes. Okay. I can pass that message up, and I would say probably contact Kate Preisler, who's our new regional director with DCR, and she could put you in touch. And I did pass that on to my boss. Or actually, I did filter down at one point where I got a call, and I think you had nominated me to run the program.
Yes, I did.
and he called and was wondering, like, what? So it's been heard, and I that's all I can really say in that regard.
Also, too, I want to say, give you a positive on Colin.
Oh, good. So
Many he's done. I think he's not you, but he's doing a tremendous job.
well, I've heard a lot of positive feedback on Colin. So Colin was my replacement. Colin Meddy is now covering my old district, and I work with him regularly, and he's been a pleasure to work with. He asks great questions. Initially, he asked a lot of questions, and I was grateful for that I was still able to be here to answer those, because a lot of the reality with state is when somebody comes in or somebody leaves a position, they may retire, and then that's it. You don't have that transfer of knowledge, and so I'm really been impressed with Colin, and I think he's doing an excellent job too. So.
He's got one hand here.
Okay.
When I look at the woods, it seems like there's an awful lot of fuel lying around, and is management of the fuel that's lying around an important part of forest fire prevention, or is it, are we in good shape, or is there something to worry about there?
So should I repeat the question for, okay, so the question is related to observations of seeing a lot of down woody debris or fuel, and are there any concerns about fire and managing that? So I would say no, with a caveat. We don't have a forest type like what we see out west. And so a lot of the really horrible fires that you see come through the news, entire trees crowning, their forest types are much different. They're largely more conifer dominant. They've had fire be more reality within their ecosystems. Fire here is nominally of concern with our past climate. Who knows where we're heading in the future? So in that regard, there is, so if you had any concerns over your home space, it's good to have fuels be, brought back from your home space so that there's a buffer. But most of our forests are largely decomposed by biological means. So we have less of a concern with fire. Although ironically, our fire season, where we do end up having most of our wildfires, is in the spring when you can get your open burning permit. And so that's the point in time. And the reason why that is because of air quality, so that the smoke will get up and dissipate quickly. At that time, though, is generally when the snow cover will melt away, and before leaf out, you get that that sun hitting the leaf layer, and so that's when you'll get a wildfire, and that's when we have most of our wildfires. So if we do start getting into periods of longer dry, then fire can be a concern, and that's where you can use forestry practices as a tool to help mitigate those dangers. So did I answer your question?
Yes, and if I can summarize, not to worry, we're not living in the conifer forest.
Yeah, it's not to worry yet, but it's not to be dismissive of it. Like I think that's the best take I can give you. I mean, I remember you know, sort of in forestry, there was you know, a lot of our, at least around here, these forests are kind of like an asbestos forest. Like especially in the summertime when everything's so wet, you're really not going to be able to get a fire happening. Yeah.
What do you think of like the invasive species though, like the fire risk might increase with like, for instance, like barberry and stilt grass and berry trees?
So question is, invasives making fire danger worse? And so, yeah, I think especially with how dense our invasives can get, like that thicket that you saw here, and then actually Mount Washington. Mount Washington is a site where I would be concerned with fire. When I was still a service forester, the fire chief contacted me because there's a lot of plantations that have failed up in Mount Washington, and they're spruce, and they never really got very tall, and so they're still retaining a lot of their lower branches, and there's a lot of invasives in there, and so they're die, and they've literally got ladder fuels, so that is a possibility, and that is a, you know, a scenario that I think could be a fire issue. I think folks in Mount Washington are concerned about that. Part of this project is actually to deal with that. We only have about 3 acres of that on our property, but I am intending to handle that as part. Hopefully, I can get this project off the ground as well. So yeah, I think the invasives are a curveball for certain.
You're talking a lot about plant invasive species. I'm wondering if you're thinking about any other kinds of species like deer, for instance, and how those might be affecting the forest around here.
Yeah.
And if you, I don't know if there's any kinds of plans.
Well, I would say for other invasive species that are of concern, deer are native, so they're not really invasive, but they do have an effect on tree regeneration. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And so there are techniques now within forestry where they're experimenting with deer exclusions, and they call them slash walls. That's pretty intensive, and so they're literally making a wall out of logs and other slash debris to prevent deer from getting in, and they are having some success out in MDC. They did that, but it does require a lot of material, a lot of effort, and some of the other concepts with deer would be when you're going to regenerate a site in a forest, you need to think about what you're trying to regenerate. And if you're really going to try to get the most regeneration as possible, you need to open it up a lot. Like a lot of our tree species require a significant amount of sunlight to regenerate. And that translates into a harvest that a lot of people would look at and say, that looks like a clear cut, or that looks like a seed tree. And so you can use those techniques to effectively overwhelm the deer by giving them you know, more browse than they can take out. The other species of concern from a different perspective would be jumping worms. They are throughout our landscape. They will recycle that duff layer and leaf litter rapidly. And I have seen that out in the forest. and particularly they thrive under barberry. So in some of our drinking water supplies that have this scenario, it creates the perfect microclimate for earthworms. So they recycle that duff layer rapidly, so it exposes mineral soil, and you're actually seeing mass erosion under here. In this site, I was seeing it back in that corner. It's probably also because of its past agricultural land use, having like a hard pan that really kind of kept the water up high. But there is some erosion concern back there. The other thing that is the reality about that is the ticks love barberry. So that's a perfect microclimate for them. So anytime I've had to walk through there, I really don't want to, but I've had to really guard myself as much as possible, wear chaps, tape my ankles, have everything tucked in, and just try to keep the ticks on the outside, and use like permethrin clothes, permethrin on my clothes. So, Chelsea.
I have a few questions, and I'll just turn this on so
Okay.
So the first question is more of a comment.
Okay.
It is difficult to support local wood with the disappearance of so many local sawmills. Can you speak on that?
Very true. So local sawmills are dying breed for sure. We lost Lennox Lumber recently, Banish Lumber in Chester. I believe they're still active, but they're not as active as they used to be. I guess one thing I do find a little inspiring is how many people are taking up portable band mills. And so I think that can help. And so there is some milling capacity still existing. And I'm hopeful that, if we can create the right incentives, that we can get some of that milling capacity back. When you get out to the Connecticut River Valley, there are more mills still in operation. So we do still have some local mills. And I didn't actually reference it, but Massachusetts is unique to a lot of different states because we have, next slide, the Massachusetts Native Lumber Law. And so the Native Lumber Law is on the books, has been on the books. It recognizes we've been building homes and like residential and agricultural buildings for hundreds of years, and we haven't had to have things be grade stamped. That's still the reality today. You can build a 1 to 2 story residential or agricultural building using native lumber that is not grade stamped. And so that's positive. So thank you for that. That is something that I hope changes.
The next question is, are there any fire prevention strategies that homeowners living in the woods should be enacting?
I guess think about that space around your home. So with landscaping, you don't necessarily, I mean, even just from like a home health standpoint, one of my former lives of work, I did a lot of landscaping. And so it's hard for people to think about how big that shrub is going to grow. And so the tendency is to tuck that shrub right up against the house because it looks great. Then it grows, and it's literally growing against the house. And so you want to think about how big that's going to be, and having a proper buffer around your home. And then right around the home is just simple things like cleaning up some of the leaves. I mean, not extensively throughout your yard, because a lot of that messiness is really great for habitat and pollinators. But that's really the best I can think about, is just creating that buffer around your home. And I guess, not being overly concerned, but being aware if you're suddenly in the middle of a drought. If you're in a drought-like condition and it's spring, that's when we're likely to have some sort of a fire situation. Any other questions from online?
There are a few more, if we can get through those, and then maybe,
Okay.
because it's getting close to 7, and then maybe folks can ask you after we.
Okay,
That's-
I will, you're in charge.
Okay, so the next one is there potential for using invasives like hardy kiwi and biochar?
Yep, definitely. I would say anything can actually be used, not anything, but like most residues, like stuff that we don't want, is a perfect candidate for biochar. I was talking a lot with this fella that has a New England biochar. His company is New England Biochar, Bob Wells. He's really been a good resource of information. And he designed systems based on the feedstock to create biochar. And so I think if you've got something like hardy kiwi or other sort of waste from your efforts, you can make the biochar. A lot of it's also just trying to get it dried, having it dry naturally before you start the combustion process. Otherwise, a lot of that energy in the combustion process is going to initially just be focused on getting the water out of the material. And then once you get the water out of the material, the volatile organic compounds come off, and that's what really creates that clean burn. And when if you can control it just right, if you are only burning the volatile organic compounds while maintaining like an oxygen-free environment for that medium, then you're left with that pure charcoal, which can be then utilized for agricultural purposes. And now they're actually even looking at other industrial applications, where I read something recently where they're blending it with concrete to make concrete less polluting. So yeah, definitely.
Cool. One other, what fraction of wood harvested in the state is used as fuel? Does this include private woodlots and casual users?
What fraction of wood harvested in the state is for fuel?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but I'm sure I could probably get some idea. That would be like, I have to follow up with you later kind of question. So you could send me an email. I think we could kind of take a stab at that.
Okay, cool. And then the last Zoom question, any comment on the very vocal opposition to the ant lot project in October Mountain State Forest?
The very woeful?
Vocal.
I would like to just say no. No comment. I guess I would say I can relate that to many projects that I've seen in my life, where I guess I'm going to be very tactful with how I approach this. Is like the people are most concerned about the project are the ones that are going to be closest to it, that don't really understand what's happening and don't have any control over what's happening, or feel like they don't have any control. And so part of our public process is to engage the folks that are in the community, particularly those that are right nearby, so that we can hear their concerns. And if there's simple things we can do to address them, we will definitely try. But we have to stick with our overall goals of the project that are going to really, that have been defined for that. So there's, in general, we have a lot of people that love trees, and so we have that in common. But then where we vary is that there's a concept of our forests are a sacred space that we should not do anything with. We should just let it grow. And then we have, the other side of the coin, where people are like, well, hey, we use wood products, we need to take responsibility for these actions, and we also want to create a forest that's going to provide habitat and all of these other benefits that we need. So there's those conflicting views that happen, and that's part of our vetting process. And I really should point out, I didn't even actually mention this yet. Right now, we are in the forest is climate solutions. We're looking for public input. So on November 14th, 2023, at 6:30 p.m., it will be an opportunity for folks to voice their concerns. If they have them, they can also write in. If you look at the bottom of the slide, it gives you a link to that website where you can write in commentary. So we're looking for people that are, of all aspects and all perspectives to really weigh in on this to help guide how we manage our land. So this is literally the forest of the people, and so we need to hear what the people want us to do with it. But then you also have to kind of realize that you might not get what you want. Wait, how many more? That's it? Okay.
Can you speak a little bit about conservation restrictions and what might make a property attractive to conservation?
What would make a property attractive for conservation restrictions? Well, generally, location's a huge thing. So if your property is say in endangered species habitat or particularly critical for water supply, something you want to give away, that also has a factor in if it's attractive or not. There's a lot of things that can be attractive, and a lot of it's also depending on who you're talking to and what their objectives are. So if it's prime ag land, I'd be talking to the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture, MDAR. If it's like something that's really unique habitat and maybe has some rare plants or rare species on it, then I would talk with DFW. Or if it's, say, a key property within your town, then you may have your local land trust to go to, and they may have some interest in it. But I would say, definitely look into that, and don't go into it lightly, because once you sign that contract, that's really in perpetuity. And that's one thing that we are grappling with in this area, where we have so much land that's protected. And how are we going to work with affordable housing? If a lot of our property is locked up and not available for creating homes for people to live in, that's a real problem. And so there's a unique effort happening now. Farmstead Preservation, I forget the name of it, but it was started, I believe, by the Harry Conklin Fund. And so the idea was really, we're going to protect land, particularly we're going to target, farmland, but we're also going to think about the farmer, like where's the farmer going to live? And so I think that there's a lot we can learn from that, where you want to protect the land, but you also want to make sure that you have the ability to protect the people that are likely to be working the land as well too. So,
just get in touch with Sheffield Land, the Sheffield Land Trust.
Yeah, if you're in Sheffield, Kathy's great.
It's New Marlboro.
New Marlboro Land Trust has I forget the for New Marlboro. Yeah. What?
Sorry, just real quick, we can do this by mail or phone. But if you had a few acres of woods and you wanted to protect them into the future, thinking of climate change, do you have resources to get saplings, seeds, and that type of thing?
The state does not have a nursery, but we could definitely give you ideas of what would be good ideas to plant. Good concepts of what to plant based on where you are. And so, Colin, as a service forester, is able to come out and meet with you locally. If he's unavailable, I'll make the time to come out and visit with you.
All right, guys, we should probably end it. Maybe Tom would be willing to answer anybody's questions once I end things, but Big Elm did stay open an extra hour for us this evening, and it's past 7, so we should probably end things so I can start.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you all in Zoom, if you can still hear me. I hope I didn't make any unpleasant noises.